The starving stranger. The rain fell hard that night. The cold wind howled through the empty fields, bending the tall grass flat against the muddy ground. David pulled his jacket tighter around him as he closed the farm gate for the night. His boots sank into the wet dirt with every step. It was just another lonely evening at the edge of the world, or so he thought. Suddenly, something caught his eye near the fence. At first, he thought it was just a pile of old clothes left by the wind. But when he moved closer, his heart skipped a beat. It was a body. David rushed forward, slipping a little on the wet ground. The figure was small, curled up tightly, shivering under the rain. It looked like a young woman, but something was different. Her skin was a soft pale blue, almost glowing under the stormy sky. She wore strange torn clothes, made of some shiny material David had never seen before. "Hey, are you all right?" David called out, but the girl did not respond. She just shivered harder, hugging herself tightly. David hesitated. This wasn't normal. She wasn't normal. His mind screamed at him to leave her, to go back to his warm house and forget he ever saw anything. Maybe she was dangerous. Maybe she wasn't even from Earth. But then she let out a soft, broken whimper, a sound of pure fear and pain. It sounded so human that David's heart melted. He knelt down beside her and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. She flinched at his touch but did not move away. Her skin was ice cold. "You're freezing," David said softly. "You need help." Without thinking further, he pulled off his thick jacket and wrapped it around her. She was so light. He lifted her, easily into his arms. Her head rested weakly against his chest. As David carried her across the muddy fields back to his farmhouse, he felt a strange warmth coming from her, like a faint pulse. And then for a moment he thought he saw a light, a soft golden glow spreading from her skin, faint and flickering like a dying candle. He shook his head. Maybe it was just his tired eyes playing tricks. But what he didn't know was that hidden deep in the field, someone or something was watching him. A pair of sharp, inhuman eyes followed every move he made, hidden in the dark. Inside the house, David carefully placed the girl on his old leather couch near the fireplace. She curled up again, trembling. He hurried to throw logs into the fire. The flames roared to life, filling the room with much-needed heat. David grabbed a thick blanket from the closet and covered her gently. For a moment, he just stood there, unsure what to do next. Who was she? Where had she come from? Should he call someone? The police? The army? But something inside him said no. He didn't know why, but he felt that if he called for help, she would be taken away, and she would never survive. David moved to the kitchen and warmed up a bowl of thick soup. It wasn't much, but it was the best he could do. As he placed the bowl on the small table near her, he noticed her eyes slowly opening. They were the brightest gold he had ever seen. Large, shimmering, and filled with pure fear. "It's okay," David said in a calm voice, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here." The girl stared at him, confused and scared. She tried to speak, but only strange, broken sounds came from her mouth. Her hands clutched the jacket tightly around her small body. David pushed the bowl closer to her. "Eat," he said softly. She looked at the bowl, then at David, then back at the bowl. Slowly, shakily, she picked up the spoon. Her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped it. The first taste made her gasp. She started eating quickly, hungrily, as if she hadn't eaten for days, maybe longer. David smiled sadly. "You must have been starving." She nodded weakly, understanding his tone even if she didn't know the words. For the next few minutes, there was only the sound of the storm outside and the soft clinking of the spoon in the bowl. David sat on the edge of an old wooden chair watching her carefully. He could see it now, the strange markings on her arms like faint silver tattoos glowing under her skin. Her ears were slightly pointed, and her hair, wet and messy, had a soft bluish tint under the firelight. She was definitely not human, but she was scared, lost, and hungry, just like any other living being. David knew he couldn't turn her away. Now. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired face with his hands. "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" he whispered to himself. The fire crackled warmly. The girl finished the soup, then slowly lay back down, wrapping herself in the blanket. Within seconds, she was asleep. David watched her breathe, steady but weak. He realized he would have to keep her hidden. He didn't know from who or why, but deep inside, he knew one thing. This was only the beginning. Outside, in the darkness, beyond the windows, unseen eyes still watched, and they were getting closer. Shelter. Under the same roof, morning light crept slowly through the curtains, painting the old farmhouse in soft gold. David sat slumped in his chair, half asleep, watching the stranger on his couch. His mind had barely rested. Too many questions circled in his head like a storm. The alien girl, this small broken being, was still curled tightly under the blanket. She looked peaceful now, but even in her sleep, her hands clutched the fabric like she feared it might vanish. David rubbed his tired eyes. He needed answers. Who was she? Why was she here? And most important, was he in danger for helping her? He got up quietly and walked to the kitchen. He made some toast and coffee, then filled a small cup with water and placed it carefully near the girl. After a few minutes, she stirred. Her golden eyes fluttered open, wide with confusion and fear. She pushed herself up slowly, her body stiff and weak. When she saw David, she shrank back, trembling. "Easy," David said gently, raising his hands. "No one's going to hurt you." The girl blinked, trying to understand. She looked around the room, her gaze darting to the windows, the door, then back to David. "You're safe here," he said again, pointing to the couch, the fire, and the food. Slowly, carefully, she reached for the cup of water and sipped. Her thin fingers shook badly. David sat down at a distance, giving her space. He didn't want to scare her more. "My name is David," he said, tapping his chest. "David." The girl stared at him for a long moment. Then she pressed her small hand against her own chest and spoke in a voice so soft it was almost a breath. "Alara." David smiled a little. "Alara. Okay." He tried to ask more questions, but it was clear she didn't understand much. She only knew a few words, broken pieces of English that she struggled to form. Still, David pieced together a little. She had come from far away. She had no home. She was running from something or someone that wanted to capture her, and she was very, very scared. Hours passed slowly. David gave her more food, simple things like bread and soup. Every bite seemed to give her a little more strength. Sometimes she would glance at him with those big golden eyes, full of trust but also deep sadness. She was like a wounded bird who didn't know if the hand reaching out would heal or hurt. David didn't push her. He let her rest, but outside trouble was growing. At sunset, a strange sound broke the calm. A low, humming noise filled the air. David stepped outside, heart pounding. In the distance, above the field, something floated silently. A dark, metallic shape, smooth like a giant black stone, hovered far above the earth. David narrowed his eyes. It wasn't any airplane he knew. It made no noise, no lights. Just a silent, heavy presence in the sky. His blood ran cold. Was it here for Alara? He rushed back inside and bolted the door. Alara sat up straight, sensing the fear. Her eyes locked onto his, wide with alarm. "They found me," she whispered brokenly. David's mind raced. He had no idea what they meant, but it couldn't be good. He closed the curtains quickly. "Stay low," he said, pointing to the floor. Alara slid off the couch and crawled behind it, hiding like a frightened child. David grabbed his old hunting rifle. It was dusty and rusty, but it was the only weapon he had. Outside, the humming grew louder for a moment, then faded. David held his breath, waiting, listening. Nothing. Minutes passed, like hours. Finally, the sound disappeared completely into the distance. David let out a shaky breath and lowered the rifle. He turned to see Alara peeking out from behind the couch, her small body trembling. "It's gone," he said, trying to sound calm. For now, she crawled out slowly and sat on the floor, wrapping the blanket tightly around herself. David sat too, across from her. "You're in danger," he said, even though he knew she might not understand all the words. "You're not safe here. Not safe. Anywhere." Alara nodded weakly. She reached into the folds of her strange clothes and pulled out a tiny device, round, metallic, and glowing faintly. She held it out to him, her hands shaking. David leaned forward, puzzled. The device flickered, and then projected a small shimmering image into the air. It was a planet, green, beautiful, full of oceans and forests. But then flashes of fire, war, explosions tore across it. Ships fleeing into space, a huge dark figure chasing them. David stared, speechless. "This... home," Alara said, voice breaking. "Gone. No more." David swallowed hard. He didn't need perfect English to understand the meaning. Her world had been destroyed. She was one of the few who survived. Now she was hunted, and by helping her, David had just made himself a target too. That night, as the farmhouse creaked under the weight of the cold wind, David sat in the dark, staring into the dying fire. Alara slept curled up near the fireplace, her breathing soft and shallow. David knew he could not turn back now, no matter what came. No matter who hunted her, he would protect her. He had to. Because deep inside, he knew her arrival in his life was not an accident. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that would change not just his life, but maybe the fate of Earth itself. Outside in the endless night, dark shapes moved silently across the sky, searching, and they were getting closer. Secrets in her eyes. Morning came with a heavy fog rolling over the fields. The world outside looked gray and quiet, almost like it was holding its breath. Inside the old farmhouse, David moved silently, careful not to wake Alara. She lay curled, near the fireplace, wrapped tightly in the thick blanket. Her skin had lost its glow, turning a pale, cold blue. She looked even more fragile in the dim light. David placed a small bowl of warm oatmeal on the table and sat across from her, deep in thought. Questions burned in his mind. Who were the hunters? How had Alara escaped them? Why did that strange device react when she showed it? And yet, the biggest question, what was she not telling him? A few hours later, Alara woke up. Her golden eyes fluttered open slowly, catching the morning light. She sat up with effort, wincing as she moved. David hurried over. "Easy," he said. "You're safe." Alara looked around nervously before her gaze settled on him. There was something in her eyes, something deep and full of hidden pain. David handed her the bowl of oatmeal. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted it with a small nod. As she ate, David tried again. "Where are you from?" he asked gently. Alara paused. She opened her mouth to speak but struggled for the words. Her English was broken, but her emotions spoke clearly. She placed her small hand over her heart. "Far? Very far. Stars? Many, many." David nodded slowly. "You ran from bad people?" Alara's eyes darkened. She nodded. "Bad, very bad. Kill all." David leaned forward. "Why? Why chase you?" Alara lowered her gaze. She picked up a stick from the fireplace and began to draw shapes in the ash. A circle, a star, and then a figure, a female figure. She pointed at the figure, then at herself. "You important?" David guessed. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. David's heart raced. He realized she wasn't just any survivor. She was someone important. Maybe very important. Alara stared at him with those wide golden eyes full of old sadness, deep loss, and something else. Something secret. Later that day, as David fixed the broken fence outside, Alara stood by the window watching him. Suddenly, a noise made her stiffen, a sound almost too soft for human ears, a low, vibrating hum. Her head snapped up. Fear filled her face. David noticed her panic and dropped his tools, rushing back inside. "What's wrong?" he asked, breathing hard. Alara pointed upward, her hand trembling. David rushed outside and looked up. Nothing but the thick fog. But then, a flicker in the mist. A shadow moving unnaturally fast across the clouds. David felt a chill run down his spine. "They're here," Alara whispered from the doorway. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She sat by the dying fire, hugging her knees to her chest. David sat nearby, unable to rest either. The tension in the air was heavy, pressing down on them. After a long silence, Alara spoke. Her voice was soft but steady. Not normal," she said, struggling with the words. "Inside me. Power." David frowned. "Power?" She nodded. She reached for the small device again, the one she had shown before. This time, when she activated it, the image was different. A shining tree, its branches glowing with energy, stood at the center of a ruined world. Beneath it, a group of beings. Some looked like Alara, some different, stood together guarding the tree. The hunters, the dark creatures, were shown attacking, burning everything in their path. David watched, stunned. "The tree is life," Alara said. "My people and I protect." She touched her chest again. Last seed." David blinked. "Seed?" Alara nodded. "If I die, tree never grow. Life, lost forever." David sat back, stunned. Alara wasn't just running for herself. She was carrying the last hope of her entire species, their life source. And now, because he had helped her, he was part of this ancient battle too. Suddenly the house shook. A loud, low boom echoed through the fields. David jumped up, heart racing. Alara stood pale and shaking. David grabbed the rifle. "Get under the floorboards," he shouted. He had built a small hidden space years ago to hide from storms. Now it would have to hide them from something much worse. Alara crawled into the space quickly. David threw a rug over the trapdoor, grabbed his old backpack, and stood ready by the window. Outside, dark shapes moved through the fog. At least 5. Figures, tall, slender, their eyes glowing faintly, approached the farmhouse. David's hands tightened around the rifle. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. But tonight he would fight if he had to. He looked down at the floor where Alara hid, then up at the approaching danger. For the first time in his life, David felt a deep, burning sense of purpose. He would not let them take her. Not while he still breathed. The first knock came. A slow, heavy bang on the old wooden door. "Open!" a cold voice commanded from the other side. David stood firm, heart hammering in his chest. Another knock. Stronger this time. David raised the rifle, aiming at the door. His mind raced. He was outnumbered, outgunned, but he wasn't alone. Under his roof, hidden beneath the floorboards, was not just a scared girl, but the last light of an entire world. And David knew one thing for sure. He was willing to risk everything to protect it, even if it cost him his life. The hunters arrive. The heavy knock echoed again, louder this time, shaking the thin farmhouse walls. David stood frozen, the old rifle aimed at the door. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Another cold voice, different from the first, spoke from outside. "We know she is here," it said in a strange, almost mechanical tone. "Hand her over, and you will live." David's hands tightened around the gun. His palms were sweaty, but his grip was firm. He glanced down at the hidden trapdoor where Alara lay hidden. He made his decision. "No one here but me," David called back, keeping his voice steady. Silence followed. Then, boom! The door blasted open, ripped off its hinges, crashing against the floor. Smoke and dust filled the room. David stumbled back, coughing. Through the haze they entered, 5 tall figures, wrapped in dark armor that seemed to drink the light around them. Their eyes glowed faintly red under smooth black helmets. They looked human, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, moving with an unnatural, insect-like grace. David raised his rifle and fired. The shot cracked through the room, hitting one of them, square in the chest. The figure staggered back but didn't fall. Instead, it tilted its head almost curiously, as if amused. David's stomach twisted in fear. The figure took a step forward. David reloaded desperately, but the creature was already upon him. With a swift, brutal motion, it swatted the rifle aside, sending it flying across the room. David stumbled backward, fists raised, ready to fight with bare hands if he had to. One of the hunters grabbed him by the shirt and lifted him off the ground with ease. "You protect the seed?" the hunter rasped. "You die with her then." David struggled, kicking and punching, but it was useless. The creature's grip was like steel. Just as David felt his strength slipping, a sudden flash filled the room. A wave of pure golden light exploded from beneath the floorboards. The hunter screamed, dropping David roughly to the ground. David gasped for air, rolling to the side. From the center of the room, Alara rose, floating slightly above the ground. Her golden eyes blazed with fierce light. Her thin body, once weak and trembling, now glowed with a powerful energy. She wasn't hiding anymore, she was fighting. The hunters hesitated, sensing the shift. Alara raised her hand. The small metallic device, the last relic of her world, floated above her palm, spinning faster and faster. The nearest hunter lunged at her. David, without thinking, grabbed a heavy iron rod from the fireplace and swung it at the creature's leg. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The hunter stumbled, falling to one knee. At the same moment, Alara unleashed the device's energy. A bright, sharp pulse of light blasted outward, slamming into the hunters like a tidal wave. The windows shattered. The walls shook. David covered his head as a wave of heat passed over him. When he looked up, 2 of the hunters lay motionless on the ground, their dark armor cracked and smoking. The other 3 retreated, hissing in anger. One pointed a clawed hand at Alara. "You will not escape again," it growled. "Our masters will tear this world apart to find you." Alara didn't reply. She simply floated there, silent, her golden aura burning brighter. The hunters turned and disappeared into the mist outside, vanishing into the fog as quickly as they had come. Silence fell. David struggled to his feet, body aching. Alara slowly floated back down to the ground, collapsing weakly into his arms. He caught her gently, lowering her to the couch. Her glow faded, leaving her looking small and exhausted once more. David knelt beside her, breathing hard. "You saved me," he whispered. Alara gave a tired, broken smile. "You saved me first," she whispered back. David didn't know what to say. Outside in the distance, the humming sound returned, fainter now, but growing louder. "They will come again," Alara said softly, her voice heavy with sadness. "Bigger, stronger." David looked around the battered farmhouse, the broken door, the shattered windows, the wrecked furniture. He knew this place was no longer safe. "We have to leave," he said. Alara nodded weakly. David stood, fire burning in his chest. He would not let them take her, no matter what it cost. He packed supplies quickly, food, water, a few tools, and bundled Alara in a thick coat. As he helped her to the door, she leaned heavily on him, barely able to walk. The fog outside was thicker now, hiding the world in gray shadows. David looked out across the fields. The mountains lay far beyond, but if they could reach them, they might find a place to hide, a place to plan, a place to fight back. "Come on," he said, holding Alara close. Together, they stepped into the mist. Behind them, the ruined farmhouse stood silent, a lonely witness to the first battle of a much greater war. And above them, unseen, in the clouds, dark shapes gathered, waiting. The real hunt had just begun. The bond between them, the fog wrapped around them like a living thing, thick and cold. Every step through the wet fields felt heavy. David half carried Alara, her body weak, her head resting against his shoulder. They didn't speak much. Words felt too small for what they both felt. Behind them, the ruined farmhouse grew smaller and smaller, swallowed by the mist. Ahead, the path stretched into the unknown. Hours passed. David's legs ached from carrying her weight, but he didn't stop. The mountains were still far, but he could see the faint outline of the trees now. If they reached the forest before nightfall, maybe they could hide better. Alara stirred weakly. "You tired?" she whispered. David chuckled breathlessly. "I'll live." Alara smiled faintly, but her eyes were filled with guilt. She tried to pull away, trying to walk on her own, but stumbled after just 2 steps. David caught her easily. "Easy," he said. "We moved together." For a moment, Alara just looked at him, like she was seeing him properly for the first time. Not as just a stranger, not just a helper, but something more, someone she could trust. She gave a small nod and let him help her again. By late afternoon, they found shelter, a small abandoned cabin hidden deep among the trees. The roof sagged, the walls were cracked, but it was dry and hidden. David laid Alara down carefully on a dusty mattress. He quickly searched the place. Old cans of food, a broken stove, a few rusted tools. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That night, as the cold crept in, David lit a small fire inside an old metal barrel. The soft glow filled the cabin with warm orange light. Alara sat wrapped in blankets, her legs curled under her. She looked stronger now, but there was still a sadness in her eyes, a loneliness that even the fire couldn't touch. David sat across from her, sipping weak tea he had made from old dried herbs he found. After a long silence, Alara spoke. "In my world," she said slowly, searching for the right words, "we live in circles." David frowned. "Circles?" Alara nodded. "Family, friends, all connected. One life touches another." She drew a circle in the dust with her finger. "Break one. All feel pain." David watched her silently. Alara looked up at him, her golden eyes shining in the firelight. "When my home died, my circle broke," she whispered. "I was alone." Her voice cracked on the last word. David's heart ached for her. He moved closer, placing his hand gently over the circle she had drawn. "Then let's build a new circle," King said simply. Alara stared at him, hope and disbelief battling in her eyes. She touched his hand lightly, as if making sure he was real. "You not afraid?" she asked. David smiled sadly. "Terrified, but I won't run." Tears welled up in Alara's eyes, but she smiled too, a small broken smile that carried all her pain and all her hope. At that moment, something invisible but powerful passed between them. Not just trust, not just friendship, something deeper. Outside, unseen by them, dark shapes moved through the forest. The hunters had followed their trail, and they were getting closer. But inside the little cabin, for the first time in a long time, Alara felt safe. Not because the hunters were far, but because David was close. Later that night, David drifted into an uneasy sleep. He dreamed strange dreams, of stars, of burning skies, of a great tree reaching for the heavens. In the dream, he stood under the tree with Alara, holding hands, as black shadows circled them. But the tree glowed brighter, stronger, when they stood together. When he woke up, Alara was sitting by the fire, humming softly, a strange melody, sad and beautiful at the same time. David sat up slowly. "You sing?" he asked. Alara smiled shyly. "Song of home." David listened, letting the melody wash over him. He didn't understand the words, but he felt them. It was a song of loss, a song of hope, a song for a future not yet born. Morning came. The cabin was filled with a strange, tense silence. David packed supplies again. They couldn't stay here for long. Alara stood, stronger now, her golden eyes clear. "Ready?" she said. David nodded. But as they opened the cabin door, they both froze. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the mud, leading straight to the cabin. David's blood ran cold. They had been found. Alara gripped his hand tightly. No words were needed. Together they stepped into the misty forest side by side, their bond stronger than fear, stronger than death. And ahead of them, hidden among the trees, a deadly trap waited, waiting for the seed, waiting for the protector, waiting for Iwalide, the final hunt to begin. The escape. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. David held Alara's hand tightly as they moved between the dark trees. The early morning mist clung to the ground, making every step feel like walking through a ghost's breath. Behind them, somewhere hidden in the fog, danger moved. David could feel it. The way the birds had fallen silent. The way the air felt heavier. The way his instinct screamed at him to run. Alara's golden eyes darted nervously around, catching every shadow. Her weak body leaned against David for strength, but her spirit was burning brighter than ever. They had to keep moving, they had no choice. Suddenly, a sharp whistling sound tore through the air. David barely had time to react. He pulled Alara down behind a fallen log as something sliced through the mist, a long, thin dart embedded into a tree where they had been standing. Poison. David's heart hammered in his chest. "They're here," he whispered. Alara nodded, her small hands shaking. Another dart shot past them, barely missing David's ear. They had to move fast. David grabbed Alara's hand and sprinted deeper into the forest. The ground was rough, filled with roots and rocks. Branches scratched at their clothes and skin. Behind them, shadows moved swiftly, hunters closing the distance. David's mind raced. He remembered an old river at the edge of the forest. If they could reach it, maybe they could lose their tracks in the water. Maybe, if they survived long enough. Minutes turned into a desperate race. Alara stumbled but kept pushing forward, her breaths coming in sharp gasps. David didn't let go of her hand. Not once. Even as the forest thickened. Even as the fog grew heavier. Even as the hunters came closer, the sound of rushing water reached his ears, faint but real. The river. They were close. But so were the hunters. Suddenly a figure stepped out from the mist directly in their path. Tall. Armored. Eyes burning red. David skidded to a stop, shielding Alara behind him. The hunter raised a weapon. A long black spear humming with dark energy. David had no weapon now. No gun. No tools. Just his body. And his will to protect. Without thinking, David grabbed a heavy branch from the ground and swung it with all his strength. The hunter caught it easily, snapping it in half like a twig. David stepped back, breathing hard. The hunter advanced slowly, savoring the fear. Alara stepped forward, her hands trembling, but not from fear, from power. Golden light flared around her again, brighter than before. The hunter hesitated, sensing the growing energy. Alara closed her eyes, focusing. The tiny device, the relic from her world, floated from her pocket into the air, spinning faster and faster. The ground trembled under their feet. Suddenly, with a cry that was more pain than anger, Alara released the energy. A wave of golden force blasted outward, hitting the hunter square in the chest. The creature screamed, a terrible, inhuman sound, as it was thrown backward into the trees, crashing through them like a broken, dull. David rushed to Alara, catching her before she collapsed. "Come on," he whispered, lifting her into his arms again. The river was just ahead, the trees thinned, and the roaring river came into view. Fast, wild, dangerous. David didn't hesitate. He waded straight into the icy water, holding Alara tightly. Against his chest, the cold bit into his skin like knives. The current pulled at his legs, but he pushed forward one step at a time. Behind them, more hunters reached the riverbank, hesitating at the edge. David gritted his teeth. Come on, come on. He stumbled, almost falling, but then found solid ground. Again, the far bank was close. With a final desperate effort, David surged forward and pulled Alara onto the rocky shore. They rolled onto the ground, coughing and gasping, but they had made it. For now, David sat up slowly, holding Alara close. Her body was freezing, her skin pale, but she was alive. He pulled off his soaked jacket and wrapped it around her. Alara opened her eyes weakly. You saved me again, she whispered, a small broken smile on her lips. David smiled too, though tears stung his eyes. You saved me too, he said. We save each other. They sat there for a long moment, just breathing, just being alive. But deep inside, David knew this wasn't the end. The hunters would not stop. They would come again, stronger, more dangerous. They would never stop until Alara was captured, or dead. And now, David was part of that fight. He didn't care. He had found something worth fighting for, someone worth fighting for. He would not let them take her, not while he still breathed. Far behind them, across the river, the hunters watched, silent, waiting, planning. The hunt was not over. It had only just begun. A new future. The river behind them roared like an angry beast, hiding their trail from the hunters. But David knew it was only a temporary shield. The real fight still waited ahead. He held Alara close, feeling the weak rise and fall of her chest. She was alive, but barely. He had to find shelter fast, somewhere safe, somewhere they could breathe, somewhere they could plan for the next step. David pushed himself up, his muscles aching, his body freezing. He helped Alara stand, wrapping her in his jacket tighter. She leaned heavily on him, but she tried to walk on her own. Their bond had grown beyond words now. It was something deeper, something unbreakable. Hours later, after wandering through thick woods and rocky paths, David spotted something unusual, a cave. But not just any cave. The entrance was framed by strange stones, shaped, unnaturally smooth, glowing faintly under the setting sun. Old, ancient, not human. Alara's eyes widened when she saw it. She pulled at David's sleeve, pointing. Safe, she whispered. Old place. My people. Long ago. David didn't understand fully, but he trusted her. Without hesitation, he led her inside. The cave was cool and dry, with smooth walls that seemed to hum softly with energy. In the center of the cave was a small pool of water, glowing faint blue. Around it were carvings, strange symbols David couldn't read. Alara knelt at the pool, touching the water gently. The pool responded, glowing brighter. The air filled with a soft, soothing warmth. David watched in awe as the golden glow returned, to Alara's skin, stronger now, brighter. She wasn't just healing, she was awakening. Hours passed. David built a small fire from dry wood he found near the cave. He cooked the last of the food they carried, simple beans and stale bread, but it felt like a feast after days of running. Alara sat beside him, stronger now. Her face glowed softly in the firelight, her golden eyes steady and clear. They ate, quietly, sharing smiles, sharing hope. Finally, Alara spoke, her voice clearer, her English better. This place, sacred, she said. Long ago, my people built safe homes on many worlds in case dark times came. David nodded slowly. So this is one of them, Alara smiled. Yes, hidden, protected. She paused, her smile fading a little, but not forever. Hunters will find. David looked at her seriously. Then we make a stand, he said. Together. Alara's eyes softened. not just stand, she whispered. We grow. She touched her chest, then pointed to David. Seed not just me. Now, you too. David frowned. Me? Alara nodded. When you helped, when you protected, my energy mixed with you. She took his hand and placed it over his heart. Inside you now. A part of my world. A part of my life. David felt a strange warmth under his skin. A soft pulse. Alive. He realized what she meant. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was part of the future she carried. Part of something greater than himself. That night, as the stars filled the sky above the cave, David and Alara sat by the pool. She taught him simple words in her language. He taught her songs from Earth. They laughed. They dreamed. For the first time since this nightmare began, they hoped. Days passed. David built stronger defenses around the cave. Traps, hidden paths, secret signals. Alara grew stronger too. Her powers returned slowly but steadily. Together, they learned to live, to fight, to believe. And something more grew between them, something deeper than friendship. A bond of hearts. A bond of souls. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Alara stood at the mouth of the cave looking at the sky. David joined her, wrapping a warm blanket around her shoulders. She leaned into him, her small hand slipping into his. Home, she whispered. David smiled, following her gaze to the stars. Wherever you are, he said softly, that's home for me too. Alara turned, her golden eyes shining with unshed tears. Slowly she rose on her toes and pressed her forehead against his, gesture of trust, a gesture of unity. David closed his eyes, feeling the bond between them deepen, unbreakable, eternal. Far away across the river, the hunters still searched, still hunted, still hungered. But they had underestimated one thing. They had not counted on the strength of a human heart, on the stubbornness of hope, on the power of two broken souls finding each other and refusing to break again. David and Alara stood together facing the endless stars. They had lost everything, but in each other, they had found a new beginning, a new family, a new purpose, a new future, and no force in the galaxy would take that away from them. Not now, not ever. The future was unwritten, but whatever it brought, they would face it side by side, together, forever.